movie, little orphan Terrio. This is your new life. I mean, if you know how to kill.
Oh, I know how to kill him.
Ooh, ooh, kill him. Ooh, 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 kill him. Ooh, ooh, ah.
I want to say there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy looking, clean cut, unassuming, and he fit in with
Nothing looks wrong about this man? Nothing looks wrong about this man. I don't even gotta search for it. It's like right here. These supposedly actually happened. So we're gonna see how common sense is, right?
This took place back in November of 2018 and actually wasn't even fully resolved until just recently. So back at this point in time, me and my wife were going through some hard times.
Damn.
I was making money through some
nigga working late, picking up extra shifts. He coming home, the wife loved the dog more than you. She gonna take half of everything. It's just crazy.
Slightly illegal means and had actually gone to jail for 9 months.
Okay, this nigga
got out
might
in
be the
September
problem.
Of 2018, and I had a job in the city waiting for me when I got home. Now, when I got out of jail, my wife was living with her mom, about an hour away from the city. But she knew we had to find somewhere to live close to both of our jobs.
Okay, so she held you down. She held you down while you was in the county for 9 months. What did you do? Nigga, you're the villain. Why are you in jail? And now you're just roaming the streets free.
Since we were starting all over after the legal fees, lawyers, fines, and other assorted debts, we knew we could only afford something super cheap that would let us pay week to week instead of having to pay security deposits and monthly rent up front. We found a boarding house in our city and checked it out. Our neighbors on the first floor were a 30-year-old lady and her mom. And then upstairs, there was a young guy who moved in the same week as us. And lastly, a young couple that lived in the room next to the other young guy. In the 3 months that we lived there, the only people we talked to was the young couple upstairs.
That nigga built.
Similar to us in
Yo.
There, the only people we
This nigga is jacked.
talked to was the young couple upstairs. We just usually talked to them in passing, or maybe on the front porch.
Oh no, they
we were all
smoking
out there having a
cigarette. I don't condone that.
We're just A-okay until the month of November came, and shit just started to hit the fan, left and right, with this couple who we'll name Jim and Sierra. It started off small. Things like hearing them get into short shouting matches, or one or both of them asking me and my wife to borrow money, or constantly trying to bum cigarettes.
Aren't y'all all broken there?
One day I came home and Sierra was walking into the house, the same time as me, with 3 guys that I've never seen before, and a case of beer.
Oh no. Oh no. She walking in the house, 3 niggas trailing behind her holding gooser. Oh no. I fear we know how this is going.
They party all night and keep me and my wife up, but we end up going to bed around 5 a.m.
Oh, fuck no. Niggas have me fucked up. Keeping me up till 5 in the morning when I got work the next day? Tripping.
Later, we are woken up on a Sunday. Me and
Oh, it was
wife's
Sunday.
only day
Still,
off,
he might
so
work
she
on
made
Sunday.
me-
Oh, whoa. This nigga pulled up after his wife got goosed. Oh,
throwing all of her
I hate to
stuff into
see
the
it.
front yard. He was calling her everything in the book you can imagine, and told her to get out of his life, yada yada yada. They argue for like 3 hours, and eventually someone picks Sierra up. We had a week of peace and quiet, but by the next week she was moved back in, and the fights and screaming were constant. Until one night.
where did she go for a
It was a
week?
Tuesday night, the day before my birthday. Me and my wife worked that day and just kind of lounged around after work. My wife and I ended up smoking some weed around 1 a.m. and we put in a movie to giggle at all night. The whole time we were watching this movie, we could hear Jim and Sierra screaming at each other. We could hear them stomping around as they moved around upstairs in the room right above our ceiling. It went on the whole movie, it seemed like.
Y'all can't
After
stay in one
actually
place and
making it
argue?
through the movie without falling asleep from smoking too much, we both noticed that Jim and Sierra had finally stopped fighting. We both wanted to take advantage of the quiet, and we laid down and cuddled up to sleep until we had to go to work in the morning. I was woken up in the middle of the night by my wife, who was shaking me and looking off toward my side of the bed. I was so tired and out of it that I thought maybe she saw a big bug and wanted me to kill it. I turn over to get up, and when I do, there is a man standing next to my bed.
we have a couple possibilities, right? So if we go back, right, this is what this man is built like. Assuming it's him, right? But the silhouette, it looks like him, right? So we have a couple possibilities, right? Either A, these two fucking idiots that were smoking weed at 1 a.m, knowing they had work, left their door unlocked. And this man found their way in there, right? B, even though they are still two idiots, they locked the door, and this man somehow still found his way in there. Probably broke in. Or C, seeing as how they did say that they were at least okay friends with the neighbors, he has a key or some shit. I just don't think any of these options are good. I mean, look at him.
Hunched over my nightstand, going through my drawer, and the man has an
With
empty
a
milk
big
can in
ass
his
bottle of
hand.
milk.
After rolling over and us locking eyes, he stood up from his hunched position and was just staring at me. I kicked my feet out onto the floor and I sat up on the bed as he started backing up slowly, one step at a time. At this point, I finally realized that it's Jim in our room going through my stuff, holding an empty milk gallon.
So what does...
Now, like I said, I was still pretty out of it and just calmly said to him, "What's up, Jim? Why the hell are you in our room, bud?"
Why are you so nonchalant about this nigga being in your house?
After a few seconds, Jim asks, "Can I borrow your guys' car, man? Or can one of you take me down to the gas station and back real quick?" Thank goodness for
He
my
was
wife,
just finna
who
take the
finally
keys.
fully awake, unlike me, who said, "What? You broke in our room to borrow our car? No, you cannot borrow our car after you broke into our room at 4 a.m. Now get the hell out of here, you freaking weirdo." Surprisingly, Jim leaves, but he doesn't just leave. He sprints out the front door and starts running down the street towards the gas station that he asked us to take him to.
And you followed him?
I looked at my wife, and before we can even say anything to each other, our other neighbor from upstairs comes down and says that Jim and Sierra were fighting worse than he had ever heard or saw, that he hadn't heard any noise coming from the room for about an hour. My wife, who was feeling protective of a fellow female who had to endure similar abuse in the past, told me and our neighbor to go upstairs and check on her. So we go upstairs, and the door to Jim and Sierra's room is shut, but not locked. I knocked and shouted for someone, and there was no answer. Standing side by side, me and my neighbor turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. On the back wall of the room, Sierra was laying on the couch, face up, and we also noticed that the floor and ceiling had been hacked up, almost like someone was trying to get inside of the floor and ceiling for some reason.
He was finna bury her in the
Walked
crib.
over to the couch, thinking that Jim had knocked her unconscious, but when we made it to her, we realized there was blood on the couch and thin blood streaks on the wall, and blood all over her. I can't speak for my neighbor, but as soon as I looked at her, I thought, she doesn't have a face. The neighbor called the cops immediately, and I was just standing there dumbfounded. I heard him tell the police that Jim had smashed his girlfriend's face in with a sledgehammer, and the weapon was still there, but Jim had run off. The police told us to leave the room and wait outside if we felt safe doing so. The cops came and they put an APB out on Jim, and they found him about an hour later running down the street. After talking to the cops, they said it looked like Jim was trying to find the gas line in the house, and he probably wanted me to take him to the gas station to get fuel to help him burn down the house with Sierra inside. After all the cops left and everything calmed down, me and my wife looked at each other like, what the hell? We had to call into work the next day because there were 2 news vans out front all morning, and every time we stepped out for a smoke or anything, they were badgering us for an interview. It ended up being a small blip in the news with a short...
Nigga, somebody got murdered, and the nigga that did it broke in your house, and y'all cheesing outside for a morning smoke? I don't know, man. I don't know.
Part of the story starts in 2009, and I was a junior in high school. I lived in a small town in Ohio.
Damn, nigga. My fault, Unc.
In the fall, I started to date my first
my fault,
real
Auntie.
boyfriend, John. He was a senior, and many of his friends were dating my friends, and he was well-liked and funny at school. My parents were actually getting divorced at the time, so I liked spending time at his place more than mine. John lived with Chris, a man who wasn't his biological dad, but somehow he had lived with since around the age of 13 and often called him Dad. Chris was an adolescence counselor who knew John because he had been in the foster care system, and he had taken John in. Chris was an amazing human who was fun to be around, and it was just the two of them and their pug Murphy at the house. I've always been into school and extracurriculars, and I felt like John was holding me back. Our relationship was going downhill in many ways, but I was scared if I broke it off that he might really do something drastic.
Really bad situation to be in. You really can't blame her for this, though. It's like her being into extracurriculars and like wanting to do more in that lane and being around somebody who she feels hinders that. It's understandable for her to want to break it off.
One Friday night in April 2012, I'm in my hometown to see a friend, and I pass John's house.
3 years later,
I see police cars everywhere. I'm shocked and I didn't know what to think, so I immediately call our mutual friend Kyle. Kyle said he has no clue what was going on with John, and he says that John had hung out at his house a few days before. Kyle said John seemed like he was in a good mood, especially because he was driving Chris's Beamer at the time, which he loved to do.
This nigga killed Chris.
Turns out that John murdered Chris, and he was on the run somewhere.
I knew it.
It occurred days before the body was found. Which
Oh
means
my
that
God,
John was
bro.
just hanging out at Kyle's house between
Alright,
committing
bro.
his acts and
I
getting
get it.
arrested. He had stuffed Chris's body in their freezer at home.
Thumbnail.
I was lucky enough to not experience any violence at his hands. I wish I could say the same for Chris. But for the time that I did get to spend with him, though, and the positive impact he had on my life during that time, I know he had a positive effect on so many other
That's
lives.
not your nigga no more, and he killed somebody. Stop talking about him so good. Cut that shit out, bro.
It was summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation to Kennebunkport, Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up there to Maine before my dad got there, which was super annoying to me at the time, but we didn't have a choice. And my brother, sister, and I loaded into the car and started the drive. I was about 14 at the time. The drive was uneventful, but there were various delays, and we ended up getting there a lot later than originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting had turned in for the night, and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. Sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. My mom, unfazed, decided she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our favorite spots.
Nigga craving fish?
She called my dad to see if he could make us reservations.
Is
at a
that
hotel
chicken?
in Kennebunkport from New York City while we ate.
Where his nose
We were
at?
enjoying the lobster while a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom, and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the night. Go figure.
Don't tell me
Right,
this
our
nigga about to
vacation
offer a
season
place to
Kennebunkport.
stay, and y'all go take it.
I want to say there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy looking, clean cut, unassuming, and he fit in with
Nothing
the hotel.
looks wrong about this man? Okay.
He told my mom that he had a
Nothing looks wrong about this man.
home,
Okay.
a big guest house that we were more than welcome to stay at, and that his wife wouldn't mind.
Nigga got a
Immediately,
wife
my
and he
screw
going up
that.
talking to girls.
No way in the world I was
Alright,
staying at
man.
a random dude's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone from Maine, but the streets get creepy. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined this guy was legit. Said he was in finance. My mom was an investment banker, and they
Him
chatted
being in
enough for my mom
finance
to
is what
decide
made him
he wasn't
legit.
Totally. I called my dad pretty hysterical, but he said I was overreacting and that I needed to get out of the city more and accept that sometimes people are just nice.
Yo, dad's stupid.
So my brother, sister, and I got into our car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was actually really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. It had 2 bedrooms, and instead of the beds being located in the middle or centered, imagine a symmetrical room layout. They were right under the window in each room. It just seemed out of place to me. Anyway, fast forward, we are all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door, and it's the guy. He said he just wanted to check to make sure we got settled. Cool. Nice thing to do.
Where your wife
30
at?
minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, thanks, we're good. We'll stop by the house in the morning to say thank you, etc. Okay, so fast forward.
Why are you cheesing so hard?
I can't sleep, feeling terrified.
That's your
It was
terrified
frustrating.
face?
At this point, I see my mom wide awake and look up at the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add real quick, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it was because his wife was in the process of redecorating.
But where is she?
When I looked up, there was a male figure just standing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. They didn't tell you? The actual owners of that house were on vacation. I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with local authorities and figured that out, but never told us. I don't know who that man was or what was planned that evening. I was curious as to whether there were any known serial killers or murderers who were in that area at that time. This encounter happened in the summer of 2006 when I was 20 years old. I didn't get my driver's license until January of that year. I was so excited and I had a great drive, listening to good music, and it was a beautiful day for driving. Right after I crossed the border from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, I stopped at one of the first rest stops to get gas and snacks for the last part of my drive. Opposite of the gas station was the on-ramp back to I-78 West, and parallel to the on-ramp was a dirt road which comes into play later. I was heading into the store when a man in his late 30s or early 40s approached me. He was a stocky guy,
Why he
decently
pulling
tall.
up like this?
He had on a plain black tee and jeans with dark brown hair and a mustache and goatee.
Outfit.
He had just come out of a black pickup truck parked a few spaces
Black
away
on
from my
black.
car.
This is criminal.
He had a super intense gaze and immediately creeped me out. He just had a crazy energy about him.
He's still pulling up.
I don't really get bad vibes from people that often, but this was just strange. He stood too close, with his
Cheesing.
gaze crazy and direct and focused. His word choice was strange. He immediately set off all of my alarms. He asked if I was from the area, despite my Connecticut license plate. He even asked where I was headed and if I knew of anything fun to do, because he had plans later and time to kill beforehand. He invited me to go play mini golf or watch a movie with him. I truthfully didn't answer any of his questions, and I declined his invitation to hang out with him. And I told him that I didn't know the area that well.
Real?
I walked
Real?
away towards the store.
Real. Should have walked away at the first place,
he
but I get it. Real.
It was so random and uncomfortable. As I was walking away, he
Still
actually
cheesing.
screamed out, "You're gorgeous." And the volume and tone made my hair stand on end. It was super aggressive and inappropriate, and he even startled a family that was walking out of the store. It was that loud. He came into the store shortly after and he was just staring at me, so I went to use the bathroom and I stayed in there for at least 10 minutes, texting my friend about this creep.
Call the police.
When I came out, he wasn't in the store anymore, thankfully, so I took my time buying drinks and snacks.
That juice looks so good.
Sour Bright crawlers and trail mix being my
And it's like a
obligatory
big
road
jug,
trip
bro.
food, and
Now
I
I'm
went out to gas
thirsty
up
and
my
hungry
car.
at the same time.
I was relieved his car was gone, and I started thinking about the rest of my drive and getting excited to see my friend. When I pull up to the road to get back on the highway, though, I hear someone persistently honking his horn. And I see this creep show on the dirt road parallel to the on-ramp in his truck honking.
I thought he would be
and
cheesing.
shouting and waving at me to drive over to him. He was directly facing the gas station and had been waiting for me to pull up. I immediately freaked out and jumped on the on-ramp back to I-78. He pulled onto the highway after me and I called my friend extremely scared. I drove so fast and probably dangerously, and looking back, I am lucky that I didn't get into an accident, but I just didn't know what to do. He didn't follow me for that long, and I think after a few exits he finally pulled off. My friend and I had a backup plan that if I saw his car again, she would direct me to a police station the next town over from her house, instead of me going directly there and leading some freak to us. I didn't see the car again and went to my friend's, but the last hours of my drive I was extremely tense and anxious. A few years ago though, in 2014, I was talking with another friend who is big into serial killers, and I mentioned my encounter jokingly, suggesting that this was a serial killer I had met, and told her my experience. She was fascinated and she wanted to Google active serial killers in Pennsylvania area at the time. The first hit was for Adam Leroy Lane.
Found that nigga straight up in the same fit. They caught him that day.
It could have been my mind filling in the blanks, but the basic characteristics, 40s, tall but stocky, brown hair with mustache and goatee, and the time and area all match. In my memory, he was a little bit slimmer than the pictures, and it was 2006, not 2007, when he was actually convicted of murdering women. Still,
He was pulling
it's
up in
an odd
that same
coincidence.
fit every
It's one I've
time.
never forgotten.
That nigga lays that shit out on the bed the night before.
It's one of those memories that isn't extremely terrifying enough to remember, but it's eerie enough to stay in your mind for a good while. I'd say I was about 13 years old when this happened. At the time, I lived in a small town, and this girl a few years younger than me had gone missing. The situation was really distressing. So, back to my experience. My mom took me to a Burger King close to our apartment. We would go there on the days when she was too exhausted from work and lacked the energy to cook. On this particular day, she went to place the order while I settled into a booth, idly toying.
Why
with a
you
paper
look
full of
just like the
straw.
girl that went missing?
Ah!
I smelt this nigga before he came on screen. Get away from him. These are just the regular type niggas that hang around Burger Kings, by the way. I would know. I've seen them.
It was as if when he entered the
Don't ask me what I was doing in a
his eyes
Burger
were
King.
Scanning around until they fixed on me, and then he made his way over to where I was seated. I can't say for certain, but I don't believe he was homeless. Perhaps he was? He had this odd smell to him, and his clothes were ripped and dirty.
Know
He
it.
kept his hands buried in his jeans pocket and kept moving them around and swaying back and forth while standing and looking down at me with that unsettling smile he kept smiling. He started talking to me, and I remember that he had that kind of voice that makes you feel gross. He just kept staring at me, and while staring, he randomly started talking about the girl who went missing and was later found dead. It wasn't like a casual topic to talk about, especially with a 13-year-old girl. This started to creep me out even more, and on top of that, there was a certain gleam in his eyes that suggested he found the whole thing exciting, both the event itself and discussing it with a young girl. He went into
I bet your mom, help! But no, she just sat there.
about how he had heard that the circumstances surrounding the girl's situation were related to matters of sexual nature. Now, when you're very young and a strange and unsettling man who appears to not have showered in probably weeks is discussing sexual topics with you, and he's using such intense language and emphasis with his words, it's just really unnerving. The entire situation is messed up.
Shout for your mother. What are you doing?
This guy was standing extremely close to me, practically blocking.
Wait, no, I'm not even gonna blame you. Why has your mom not looked back one time? Let me see if my kid is okay. Who the fuck is this nigga? Like,
It
mom.
was as if he was aware that unless he stood almost pressed against my side, I would promptly get up and abandon this so-called charming conversation. Luckily, before he could talk more about sex or ask if I've done it before, which is where he was going, my mom saw him.
Took
She
her
came
long
over and asked him
enough.
loudly what he wanted and why he was talking to me. He looked surprised, stepped back really quickly, and left. Some workers rushed out after him to check who he was and what he looked like because they didn't know whether to call the cops or just make sure he never came again.
Do
Really
both?
shaken up, and my mom was freaked out too. She said she was gonna buy me mace and stuff to stay safe after.
This
that.
is why you don't hang around Burger Kings.